In 1937, Japan secretly greenlit a warship so colossal that no navy, before or since, has matched its scale. The official plan claimed this monster would guarantee victory. History proved otherwise. Concealed beneath roofed dry docks, it carried guns so large their true size was disguised from the world. But when Doctrine collided with reality, this titanic gamble turned into a warning for generations. Why did leaders risk everything on the most absurd battleship ever conceived? And what doomed their vision before the ship even fired a shot? Naval planners in Tokyo believed victory at sea would come down to a single decisive clash. This idea, called Kantai Kessen, dominated Japanese naval thinking for decades. Staff officers and admirals studied war games and memos, convinced that a battle between rival fleets, with each side unleashing its full power, would decide the fate of nations. The Imperial Japanese Navy's entire strategy revolved around preparing for this duel. They looked back to the lessons of Tsushima in 1905, where overwhelming firepower and careful planning delivered a stunning win. To repeat that success, they needed ships that could outgun and outlast any enemy. The 8-8 Fleet Plan, formalized in staff papers after World War I, called for a corps of 8 battleships and 8 battle cruisers. Every new design, every budget request, returned to this vision. Even as treaties tried to limit ship sizes, Japanese planners quietly sketched blueprints for vessels that would break those limits when the time came. Memos from the 1930s show a relentless focus on gun size, armor thickness, and the ability to survive hits at long range. Officers debated how to create a ship immune to enemy shells, especially the 16-inch guns of the United States Navy. By the mid-1930s, the drive to build the ultimate battleship was more than a technical challenge. It was a matter of national pride and survival. The staff doctrine demanded a ship that could dominate the Pacific in a single overwhelming confrontation. This belief would shape every decision that followed, and it set the stage for a warship unlike anything the world had ever seen. Japan's withdrawal from the Washington and London naval treaties in 1934 set off a chain reaction that no one could stop. With every restriction gone, naval architects found themselves in a race with no finish line. Each new rumor of American or British battleship designs fueled demands for even more ambitious plans. By 1937, the pressure inside the Naval General Staff was so intense that compromise seemed impossible. The only answer was to go bigger, heavier, and more powerful than anything imagined before. One historian describes the mood as a kind of fever. There was a sense that Japan had to leapfrog the West or risk being crushed. Every ton of steel, every inch of armor became a statement of national will. The leadership was convinced that only a ship of unprecedented size and strength could guarantee survival in a future Pacific War. Internal memos from 1937 show staff officers arguing that anything less than a main battery of 46 centimeters would be an admission of weakness. The planners were locked into a mindset where escalation was the only option. By the time the first Yamato-class keel was laid in late 1937, the arms race had become a runaway train. The design process churned through dozens of drafts, each one pushing further past the limits of existing shipyards and steel production. By 1941, the stakes were so high that the entire project became a point of no return. The Imperial Japanese Navy had bet everything on the idea that raw size and firepower could still decide the fate of empires. Stretching 263 meters from bow to stern, the Yamato-class hull dwarfed every battleship before it. At full load, the ship weighed in at nearly 72,800 tons, about 30% heavier than even the mighty Iowa-class. The beam spanned almost 39 meters, so wide that the ship could never pass through the Panama Canal. Shipyards at Kure and Nagasaki had to be rebuilt just to handle the sheer mass. Dry docks were deepened and new cranes installed, each capable of lifting over 100 tons. Even the slipways needed reinforcement as the weight of the armor and guns threatened to buckle the supports. Moving a vessel of this size was an engineering puzzle. Turning required a diameter of more than 600 meters, and the hull's stability became a subject of debate among naval architects. One engineer later remarked that the Yamato felt less like a ship and more like a floating fortress. Every detail, from the reinforced bulkheads to the prismatic hull, was dictated by the demand for scale. No navy had ever attempted anything on this level before. The centerpiece of Yamato's design was its main battery, 9 Type 94 guns, each with a bore diameter of 46 centimeters. These were the largest naval guns ever put to sea. Each barrel was over 21 meters long and weighed as much as a small locomotive. A single armor-piercing shell tipped the scales at 1,460 kilograms, nearly the weight of a compact car. Fired at full charge, these shells could reach targets over 42 kilometers away, well beyond the horizon. The firepower was staggering. A full broadside delivered more than 13,000 kilograms of steel and explosives in one volley. To shield this arsenal, the designers wrapped Yamato in layers of steel armor that defied convention. The main belt along the waterline measured up to 410 millimeters thick and was sloped to deflect incoming shells. Turret faces reached 650 millimeters, thicker than the armor on most tanks of the era. Deck armor ranged from 200 to 230 millimeters, intended to resist plunging fire at long distances. Inside the citadel, vital spaces were protected by a honeycomb of bulkheads and splinter layers. Every decision reflected a single goal: to survive and win a duel against any battleship afloat. The design team believed that, with this combination of unmatched guns and fortress-like armor, Yamato could not only outgun, but outlast any adversary in a decisive fleet action. At Kure and Nagasaki, Secrecy became a project all its own. The shipyards were transformed into fortresses, with dry docks covered by massive roofs to block the view from above. Workers entered through guarded gates, swore oaths of silence, and often spent months assembling a single section of hull or of a turret without ever seeing the whole design. Blueprints were split into fragments, destroyed after use, and rarely left the drafting rooms. Even most naval officers never glimpsed the full plans. This obsession with secrecy came at a staggering cost. Every layer of security slowed construction and drove up expenses. Specialized cranes capable of lifting over 100 tons had to be built just to move the armor plates. The dry docks themselves were deepened and reinforced, consuming thousands of tons of concrete and steel before the first hull plates were even laid. The price tag for Yamato soared to around 180 million yen, enough to build several aircraft carriers or dozens of destroyers. For every yen an hour spent, the Navy gambled that keeping the ship hidden would buy time and strategic surprise. In reality, it tied up resources that Japan desperately needed elsewhere, all for a ship whose true scale remained a closely guarded secret until the war was nearly over. Yamato entered service in December 1941, but the world she sailed into had already changed. In June 1942, the Battle of Midway shattered the old vision of sea power. 4 Japanese carriers were lost in a single day, all to airstrikes launched far beyond the reach of any battleship's guns. From that moment, aircraft carriers dictated the course of the Pacific War. Battleships like Yamato, built for duels that would never come, found themselves sidelined. Naval strategists began to question the value of ships whose main weapons could not even reach the enemy. Despite her massive guns and thick armor, Yamato spent most of her career as a floating headquarters or escort, watching as carriers took center stage. One historian later wrote that the age of the battleship ended not with a bang, but with the drone of aircraft engines overhead. On April 7, 1945, Yamato steamed south with 9 escorts, bound for Okinawa on a mission with no return. American codebreakers had already tracked her. By midday, the sky filled with the roar of 386 carrier-based aircraft. Dive bombers and torpedo planes attacked in relentless waves, circling the giant from every angle. Bombs tore through decks. Torpedoes slammed into her hull. 11 confirmed hits, each one flooding new compartments. Anti-aircraft guns blazed, but the swarm never let up. Fires raged below decks. Within 2 hours, the world's largest battleship rolled to port, capsized, and exploded. Nearly 3,000 crew went down with her. The very size that once promised invincibility now left her helpless, unable to dodge or hide from the storm unleashed overhead. No navy will ever build a giant like this again. Technology and strategy have moved on, but the Yamato's legacy endures as a caution. When ambition outpaces reality, even the largest force can be rendered powerless overnight. The lesson is as relevant in today's arms race as ever.